They didn't see me, or rather, they chose not to. Not even when I stood 5 feet away from them. From the back row, I watched my own father smile with a pride he'd never once directed at me. His silver stars gleamed against his chest, matching the pristine perfection of his uniform. Not a thread out of place, not a crease dared wrinkle. And Jason, standing beside him, basked in the glow of admiration as the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Captain Jason Cole, United States Air Force. The applause was thunderous. 10 years ago, I wore a uniform too. But that version of me was buried the day I left the battlefield. And the family dinner table. The room was cold despite the grandeur. Tall American flags stood sentry along the walls, and behind the podium, a polished seal of the Department of Defense shimmered under stage lights. High-ranking officers lined the front rows, decorated, applauded, revered. Me, I had been escorted to the back by a young airman who blinked in confusion when he saw the name on my ID. "You're a major?" I replied softly. "Just a guest today." I hadn't been invited by Jason. Or Alan. The envelope bore the seal of the Pentagon signed by someone from protocol. No note. No warm welcome. Just a formality like inviting the ghost of a soldier they'd rather forget. The ceremony moved quickly. Speeches, medals, handshakes. Jason took the stage handsome in his blue dress uniform, every inch the golden boy. He gripped the microphone with practiced confidence. "I wouldn't be here without the people who shaped me," he said. "My mentors, my comrades, my family." A pause. I held my breath, waiting. My father, Colonel Cole, taught me strength. My mother, Meredith, gave me compassion. That was it. I smiled anyway. A weak practice twitch of the lips. The kind you wear when you've sat through 100 family dinners where you're spoken about in the past tense, if at all. Jason didn't look my way. Neither did Alan. Meredith glanced over once, or rather her eyes flicked past me, then sharpened into something vaguely smug when she realized who I was. She didn't wave. She tilted her chin slightly, a gesture that said, "You came." I adjusted the sleeve of my blazer. No medals today, just civilian gray. It was easier this way, invisible among the brass and salutes. When Jason descended from the stage, applause rising once more, he moved down the aisle, shaking hands, grinning. He was surrounded instantly by admirers, classmates, fellow officers, a few old family friends. As he neared my row, I stood up. He saw me. I know he did. His eyes paused for half a second. He gave a nod, polite, distant, like one might offer to a former teacher they half remember. Then he was gone, swallowed by the next circle of applause. I sat down slowly, the air knocked out of me not by violence but by omission. This was not new, just freshly rehearsed. From the stage, the ceremony continued. They called more names, more medals, but I no longer heard them. I studied the backs of heads, gray, brown, blonde, all neatly lined in military discipline. I traced my memory back to the last time I'd stood in front of a room like this, uniform-pressed, chin-high, heart full. I had returned from my final deployment with a back injury and an offer to teach strategy at West Point. Alan refused to attend the welcome ceremony. He'd sent Jason instead. Meredith hadn't even texted. And now, 10 years later, I was the outsider at my own brother's victory parade. Somewhere in the periphery, I caught the sharp scent of aftershave, familiar. Unmistakable. The ceremony ended. People stood. A sea of uniforms and clapping hands blurred before me. I was about to turn and leave when I heard it. Major Cole. A voice firm, commanding, rang from behind. I turned instinctively, the name tugging at a reflex I thought I'd buried. Standing near the side door, half-shadowed by the flag display, was a man in dress greens. Older. Taller than I remembered. But the same steel-gray eyes and jaw set like granite. General Huxley. I hadn't seen him in almost a decade, not since the mission that cost me my career and my place at my father's table. And now here he was, at Jason's ceremony, looking straight at me, Major Rebecca Cole. I thought they retired legends with parades, not silence. His voice hadn't changed. Still clipped, still gravel-edged, still carrying a weight that could stop a room. I turned to face him fully. General Huxley stood tall, his posture rigid even in stillness. There was a flicker of warmth behind his eyes, the kind reserved for someone you once trusted with your life or almost lost in the field. I offered a thin smile. Some legends aren't convenient enough for parades. Ah, he murmured. So it was silence by design. The hallway behind the auditorium stretched in sterile fluorescence-tiled floor security cameras, perched like vultures in corners, and the faint buzz of electricity humming overhead. No one else lingered here. Just us two ghosts in uniforms long shelved. He gestured to the nearby bench. Got a minute? I nodded, more curious than cautious. We sat a respectful space between us. For a long second he didn't speak, just studied me like he was cataloging every line the years had drawn. Finally, he reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and withdrew a small battered notepad. I kept tabs on you after Kandahar, he said simply. My jaw tightened. He didn't seem to expect gratitude. Your file got red-stamped, sealed up tight. But I saw what I needed. You didn't break protocol. You made a call, a hard one. And it saved lives. That's not what the review board said. That board, he scoffed, would have folded under the pressure of a coffee order. I looked away, eyes drifting toward the far end of the hallway. Not everything is visible in the report, sir. No, he agreed. But some things are still remembered. A pause stretched between us. His gaze softened. That day when you took over the op after your CO was hit, you held that line. We both know it. So why'd you vanish afterward? Because disappearing was easier than defending myself to a family that had already written me off. Because when your father signs the transfer papers without even looking you in the eye, you stop asking why. I didn't say any of that. Instead, I replied, I thought I was done. Were you... I... don't know. He reached into his coat again and pulled out a card, black embossed with a faint silver eagle seal. No rank. No department. There's a reason you're still on file, he said, handing it to me. We don't keep ghosts unless we think they'll come back. I stared at it, fingers brushing the fine cardstock. One side bore nothing but a number, no name, no division. I started to hand it back. I'm not. He cut me off with a raised hand. Don't answer now. I'll wait 3 days. After that, I'll assume you're done for good. His tone wasn't pushy. It was final, a door he'd leave open for a precise amount of time, then bolt shut. He rose, adjusted his collar, and paused before turning. What they erased, we still remember. He walked off without waiting for a response. I sat there long after his footsteps faded. The hallway felt colder now, harsher, like the shadows had grown teeth. I turned the card over. On the back, in tidy block script, someone had written one word by hand, Sentinel. The ink was faintly smudged like it had been penned in haste, or maybe secrecy. Sentinel. It rang a bell I hadn't heard in years. Not a unit. Not an official program. Something quieter, whispered about in war rooms, mentioned only in classified debriefings, half dismissed as rumor. A network of former operatives, off books, autonomous. Mission first, consequence later. They recruited quietly. They offered nothing. And demanded everything. I'd heard the name once. In Helmand. A sergeant went missing after an ambush. Months later, she resurfaced across the border with a cache of information that unraveled an entire smuggling ring. She never filed a report. Never wore a uniform again. Just vanished into a rumor called Sentinel. Now here it was written in ink held in my hand. My breath caught. Was this what Huxley had been tracking all these years? Was this his way of saying, "We still believe in you, even if your own family buried you"? I rose slowly, slipped the card into my coat pocket, and made my way toward the parking lot. The March air outside was sharp against my skin. The crowd from the ceremony was dispersing. Laughter, handshakes, congratulations, all flowing around Jason like confetti. I didn't join them. I didn't look back. But the weight in my pocket reminded me someone still saw me. And for the first time in a long while, that mattered. You can win medals for saving lives, but you can also lose everything for speaking too soon. The rain pattered gently against the thin motel window pane, turning the world beyond it into a blur of headlights and shadows. The bedside lamp flickered occasionally, as if uncertain whether this room deserved illumination. I sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn close, a stack of yellowed papers in my lap, creased, folded, some corners smudged with dirt, or maybe something else. Blood, perhaps, from a past too long suppressed. The seal on the folder had faded. Afghanistan Field O Peace, March 2016. One mission, one decision, and the silence that followed. I flipped through the briefings, the after-action reports, the blurry surveillance photos. None of it could capture what really happened that day. None of it showed Madison's smile as she'd crouched beside me, whispering some god-awful joke to break the tension. None of it explained why I'd disobeyed a direct order or why I still would have done it again. We were 4 clicks outside Kandahar, tasked with securing a village suspected of harboring munitions. Intel said the area was clear of civilians. It wasn't. I saw the girl first, maybe 6 years old, barefoot, bleeding from a gash across her temple, crying beside the twisted remains of a collapsed wall. The order came fast over comms fallback. Possible secondary detonation, move out. But I'd already broken cover. Rebecca Madison's voice crackled through the headset. "Where the hell are you going?" "There's a kid," I snapped. "I can't just—" "That's not the mission," I didn't answer. By then I was already halfway across the open ground, heart-hammering, gun drawn low. I reached the girl, lifted her into my arms. She was lighter than she should have been, ribs sharp, body trembling. She clung to my neck like I was the only real thing in the world. Then I heard it. A crack, followed by another. Gunfire. I dropped behind the rubble, shielding her as best I could. My radio buzzed with static, then silence. When I reached the rendezvous point, Madison wasn't there. They found her body an hour later. The official report listed enemy sniper activity, compromised extraction, and time-sensitive judgment errors. My name appeared exactly once, redacted in every public-facing version. I wasn't demoted, wasn't court-martialed. I was shelved. No medal, no commendation. Just a polite request to take some time. The time became permanent. The folder in my lap trembled as I stared at the final page. Madison's name underlined in bold. Cause of death, hostile engagement during retreat. But I knew the truth. She hesitated when I didn't follow orders. She waited too long in the open, trying to buy me a few more seconds. That guilt had a shape. It lived in the space behind my ribs. I heard my father's voice in my head, calm, clip, the kind of disappointment that didn't raise its voice because it didn't have to. "If you want to play hero," he'd said, standing at the edge of my hospital bed, "do it off the record." I had 27 stitches in my leg. My hands were still raw from dragging a civilian and a wounded soldier out of a collapsed corridor. But all he saw was a daughter who'd broken the chain of command. "You think sentiment has a place in battlefield calculus," he added. "You risked protocol. You cost a soldier her life." "Her name was Madison," I whispered then. "She was my friend. She was your responsibility," he snapped. "And you failed her." That was the last meaningful conversation we had. I looked down at my hands now, the same hands that once clutched that child's fragile body, that dug through rubble that held Madison's dog tags after the mortuary team handed them over. I pulled the tags from the side pocket of my duffel. I never let them go. Never had the heart to send them to her family. Some part of me felt like I didn't deserve to. I leaned back against the headboard, closed my eyes. Madison's laugh echoed faintly, a memory more vibrant than any citation. She'd said once, "The army teaches you rules. War teaches you reasons." A buzz from my phone jolted me upright. Unknown number. The message was short. 5 words. Sentinel needs a ghost. Now. My breath caught. No signature. No instructions. But I understood. And they knew I would. The past wasn't done with me. And maybe, I wasn't done with it either. I didn't just survive war. I designed the firewall to prevent the next one. The glass building shimmered beneath the DC. Sun its angles sharp as intent. No flags flew here, no uniforms saluted. It wasn't a place meant to inspire loyalty, it was meant to command silence. Sentinel's headquarters looked like every other anonymous tech firm on K Street, but inside the pulse of national defense thrummed through every fiber optic cable. The elevator opened directly into level 3. Retina scan, 2-factor authentication, voice match. They'd made this place secure, yes, but I'd made it untouchable. Welcome back. Ghost Avery grinned, standing at her workstation, a tangle of fiber lines and floating screens surrounding her like a command center. 28, MIT dropout, hacker with a cause. The best kind of dangerous. I offered a tight smile. Still naming our security layers after Greek mythology. Of course, she chirped. Cerberus just flagged a malware fingerprint from Langley. I'm feeding it to Chimera to mutate. I raised an eyebrow. Tell me you didn't loop NSA surveillance nodes into Chimera again. She smirked. They shouldn't have left the back door open. Classic Avery. I stepped past her into the main bay. Sentinel's interface floated in translucent layers, global maps, active threat matrix, predictive conflict modeling. But what caught my eye was the core engine running beneath it all. The one I had written. Lines of code that once lived in my apartment scribbled on napkins between insomnia and fury. I hadn't worn a uniform in 7 years, but every night I wrote new weapons. Not bullets, firewalls, not ambushes, algorithms. Status I asked, eyes fixed on the threat matrix. We're 2 weeks from DoD review, Avery said. They'll pilot Sentinel across 3 joint bases. If it passes field testing, it's nationwide. And do they know who built the architecture? Avery hesitated. Your name's nowhere on the documents. I looked away. They wouldn't sign if it was. She turned toward me, her gaze sharper now. Then let them sign first. The silence between us wasn't just strategy. It was survival. I'd built Sentinel under a shell corporation layers deep in NDAs and firewalls. On paper, the software came from a civilian think tank. No trace of a disgraced major. No reminder of the war no one wanted to talk about. Who's assigned to approve the field trials, I asked. Avery reached into the secure drawer beneath her desk and handed me a red folder. I opened it. The top page bore a name typed in crisp black ink. General Huxley Dode, Senior Cybersecurity Liaison. Of course it was him. My breath hitched, not out of fear but something stranger, a sliver of recognition. Like fate wasn't just circling, it was coming in for a landing. He doesn't know it's me, does he? I asked. Avery shook her head. He's only seen the software, not the architect. I sat down slowly. Across the room, Sentinel's holographic interface continued to evolve, the data streams curving into equations that could predict cyber conflict hours before they sparked. Huxley would see the design. He would know the pattern. He always saw the pattern. Once he signs, Avery said quietly, Sentinel becomes national infrastructure. It'll outlive elections, generals, and contracts, but not its maker. Her words hung in the air, half truth, half warning. I stood again, walked toward the primary projection wall. My fingers grazed the panel as Sentinel lit up in response. No medals, no recognition. But this was my war now. Data instead of rifles. Precision instead of orders. Justice, not vengeance. Let them take credit. Let them paste other names on my work. But I knew. I hadn't disappeared. I had become the ghost in their machine. Behind me, Avery's voice dropped to a near whisper. You really okay with being erased again? I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I turned the red folder over. On the back, scrawled in familiar handwriting, were 6 simple words. The firewall they need most is you. I clenched the edge of the folder, a mix of pride and nausea rising in my chest. If Huxley signed it, Sentinel would become part of the national fabric. A legacy, but not mine. She left a seed. Not a fortune, not forgiveness, but a seed. The attic smelled of cedar and long-forgotten winters. Dust floated in sunbeams like memories too stubborn to settle. I pulled the string light overhead and ducked beneath the sloped beams of my mother's old cabin in Alexandria, Virginia. The place had been closed for years, maintained by the barest legal threads, but something had pulled me here. Or rather, someone. I opened the old chest near the window, the one she'd told me never to toss. Beneath layers of folded quilts and pressed books, I found her journal. The leather cover was cracked and warped with age, but her handwriting still danced in deep blue ink across each page. Don't let them erase who you are. The words leapt off the paper like they'd been waiting. I read it again, then once more, as if repetition might reveal something I'd missed for years. The date on the entry was 6 months before her final hospitalization. Beneath that page, tucked between the binding and back cover, was a small sealed envelope addressed to me. Rebecca, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. But there's still something left that belongs to you. And to them. No signature. No return address. Just the scent of lilacs, faint but present, like her ghost refusing to vanish entirely. I sat across from the man in a tan suit in an office so old the wood paneling had started to curl from the edges. Michael Brenner-esque former estate attorney. Pale, sweaty palms. The kind of man who wore regret like cologne. I knew Elizabeth for almost 20 years, he said, offering weak tea and weaker apologies. She gave me strict instructions to only release this if you ever came looking. He handed me a manila envelope. This isn't a copy of the will the family filed after the funeral. This is the original. My throat tightened. I opened it slowly. Inside were notarized documents sealed in 2015, 2 years before her death. It detailed a plot of land in Southern Virginia and a trust of nearly $600,000. The money was earmarked not for Jason, not for Alan, but for a project titled simply Elizabeth House. The description was short. Just one line. For the women they forget. I swallowed hard. Michael cleared his throat. Your father presented a different version of the will at probate, one that omitted this clause. He hid it, I whispered. Why he didn't flinch? You tell me. He was afraid of something. Afraid of me, of what she wanted me to become. I flipped through the remaining documents. There was a memo from Elizabeth to the original architect, a concept for a shelter and transitional support center for female veterans and survivors of domestic abuse. It was idealistic, ambitious, and deeply personal. My mother hadn't just written me a letter, she'd built a lifeline, and someone had buried it. I stood, the folder still open in my hands. Can I have this? It's yours, Michael said. It always was. The will was never legally revoked, just suppressed. If you challenge the probate, you'll have standing. I nodded, heart pounding. Justice for me had always been abstract. a medal that never came, a silence I learned to live with. But this was tangible. This was real. As I stepped out of the office, the wind hit me sharp and cold. I didn't flinch. Back at the cabin, I cleared off the dining table and spread out the blueprints. The site was modest 10 acres in Loudoun County, adjacent to a now-defunct training facility once used by Army medics. But there it was, penciled neatly in the corner of the site plan, Elizabeth House, future entrance. I traced the words with one fingertip, letting them burn into memory. A forgotten will. A silenced dream. And now, a seed. One that someone had tried to bury, but I was going to plant it. The ink had faded, but the guilt hadn't. The Army's archive wing sat like a forgotten bunker behind the northern edge of Fort Belvoir, shielded by years of budget cuts and bureaucracy. The air inside was dry, sterile, like memory preserved under vacuum seal. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as I walked the corridor lined with sealed vault drawers, each one labeled by date and operation number. I clutched the small piece of paper torn from my mother's journal. The code written in her hand wasn't one I recognized at first until I remembered Madison's handwriting from 7 years ago. She'd once jotted something similar on the back of an MRE box and winked. Backup breadcrumbs, she'd said. Now it led me here. Behind the reinforced plexiglass window sat a man in his late 50s with creases deeper than his uniform regulations. His nameplate read Sergeant Victor Salinas. His eyes flicked up as I approached. I'm looking for archived material from Operation Spearpoint. March 2016. He didn't blink. Those files are closed. I'm aware. I'm not looking for a full dossier, just one item. A letter. He leaned back. There were no survivor letters filed from Spearpoint. There was at least one, I said, holding up the torn journal page. Madison Reyes wrote it. She told me, once. She was writing to her mother. She tucked it into her vest before we deployed. I need to know what happened to it. Victor studied me for a long moment. What's your name? Major Rebecca Cole. His eyebrows twitched. You're that Cole? I'm the only one who walked out of that village, I said flatly. Madison didn't. I need to see if the letter made it to the system. He exhaled slow and hesitant, then stood. Follow me. We passed through 2 keycard locks and a biometric scanner before entering the core archive chamber. Floor-to-ceiling filing units line the walls, each drawer labeled by alphanumeric tags, too cryptic for anyone without clearance. Victor moved with muscle memory fingers trailing across rows until he stopped. Drawer 9F. He slid it open, revealing neatly stacked sealed packets, each one containing fragments of lives lost, recovered, and stored. He pulled one out. M.R. Reyes. Envelope marked non-authorized delivery. Flagged and filed. He handed it to me. My fingers trembled slightly as I peeled back the flap. Inside was a single sheet, slightly yellowed edges curled with age. Madison's handwriting was unmistakable, blocky neat, always in blue pen. Dear Mom, if this letter finds you, it means I didn't make it back. But don't cry, not yet. Because I need to tell you what really happened out there. I sat down on the edge of a steel bench, heart racing. I saw a child. She was bleeding. Command said fall back. But Rebecca, she didn't. She went for the girl. And I followed. I followed her mom. Not orders. Her. Because in that moment I realized something no protocol ever taught me. Some lives weigh more than medals. I wiped at my eyes. Rebecca saved that child. And she tried to save me too. She dragged me as far as she could until the bullets made that impossible. She didn't leave me. I told her to run. If this letter never makes it home, I need someone to know she didn't fail. She saved us both. I reached the end and then saw one more line hastily scrawled sideways along the margin. If I don't make it, tell her. I trusted her more than anyone. My chest tightened, breath shallow. That one sentence shattered the silence that had settled around me for years. Not silence from war, but from shame, doubt, from believing I was the reason she died. But she trusted me, enough to follow, enough to write this. I folded the letter with reverence. Why wasn't this sent to her family, I asked, standing slowly. Victor shrugged, flagged as non-deliverable. Why? He hesitated. That flag only gets triggered two ways. Either the sender didn't have final authorization, or someone in command pulled it. Who has authority to intercept it? Victor's voice was low now. Only immediate family, or a colonel with clearance. I stared at him. A colonel. He nodded once. The edges of the letter curled tighter in my grip. I didn't need to ask who had both power and motive to silence it. Alan Cole. You can't erase a name if someone writes it again. The waiting room smelled like decades of lost time, faded ink mildew from old carpet, and the sterile musk of bureaucratic apathy. The Department of Veterans Affairs building in D.C. hadn't changed since the last time I walked its halls in uniform, except now I wasn't wearing one. Just a plain navy blouse and slacks that felt too stiff against the weight I carried. I held the file tightly in my hand. Inside was the letter Madison wrote a notarized copy. A sworn statement. My original discharge documents. And the most damning of all, a signed authorization for my retirement bearing a signature that was not mine. The receptionist barely looked up. Name Rebecca Cole. He tapped a few keys. Appointment with Legal Review Office 12C. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor. The corridors were narrower upstairs, cluttered with framed flags and faded commendation photos. I found the door labeled Captain Dana Halverson, Legal Affairs, and knocked once before entering. She was younger than I expected, late 30s, maybe early 40s. Crisp, uniform, sharp eyes. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Major Cole. Technically, I said. But not according to your records. She raised an eyebrow. Let's see what you've got. I handed her the file. Silence settled like a dropped curtain as she flipped through the documents. I watched her face shift neutral at first, then concerned, and finally unsettled. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. According to this, your retirement was filed under medical grounds and signed by Colonel Alan Cole on your behalf. I said nothing. She looked up. Was that authorized? No, I replied. I never saw those forms. I never agreed to the terms. I wasn't incapacitated. I was benched. She leaned back, fingers steepled. If what you're claiming is true, someone used improper command authority to retire you without full review. That violates multiple federal codes and military protocol. I'm aware, I said, voice steady. That's why I'm asking for my case to be reopened. She studied me for a long moment. You realize this could trigger a full inquiry. That's the idea. She nodded slowly. We'll need corroborating data. Something that suggests you weren't a ghost in the system. I opened my bag and pulled out a slim hard drive. This is from Avery Chen, I said. Chief engineer at Sentinel Systems. It logs every commit and patch I wrote for the Sentinel firewall over the last 4 years. I built that system. I've been here the whole time. Just off the record. Dana blinked. The same Sentinel currently under final DoD approval. The same. She turned the drive over in her hand. If this checks out, it changes everything. Not for me, I said quietly. But maybe for others. Just then my phone buzzed. A message from Avery. They're fast-tracking approval. Huxley's already signed the first stage. Dana glanced at the stack of forms again. This Madison Reyes letter. It's powerful. But this. She pulled the forged signature form out. This is explosive. She flipped it over. It's dated the week after your final deployment. No attached medical notes, no evaluation, just a statement of discharge and your father's signature. It was enough to bury me. Her eyes narrowed. This could open a congressional review. I leaned forward. Good. Because if they want to bury ghosts, they should know some come back with proof. He buried more than a will. He buried a woman's last wish. The old law office sat nestled between a bakery and an insurance firm on a quiet street in Annapolis. Its sign was faded and the door creaked with the kind of history most people tried to forget. I stepped in and was greeted by the scent of oiled wood paper and the low hum of a printer warming up. Harper Lynn stood as I entered. Mid-60s elegant but blunt, her silver hair was tied in a tight bun and her handshake was firm. She gestured toward a leather chair across from her desk. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me," she said, without smiling. "I only just found the original will." She nodded. "The one your father claimed was invalid." I opened my bag and pulled out the folder. It was notarized, signed, witnessed. Why wasn't it enforced? Harper leaned back, fingers folding together. "Because Alan Cole brought me a new version 2 months before Elizabeth passed. He said she changed her mind." "She didn't," I said sharply. "I believe that too," she replied quietly. "But I'm a lawyer. I needed proof, not instincts." I frowned. "So you just let it go?" I filed both versions. But when probate court received the second one with his signature and Elizabeth's initials, they ignored the first. "Did you see her sign it?" Harper hesitated. "No. He said she was too weak to come in. He brought the papers to her." I closed my eyes, fury simmering low and deep. "And you didn't question that I did," she said, voice firm now. "That's why I kept a copy of the original. And this." She opened her drawer and took out a USB drive. "It has a voice memo," she said. "Elizabeth dictated it during our final meeting. She wanted to revise the letter in the will. But more importantly, she wanted you to know something." Harper plugged the drive into her laptop and hit play. My mother's voice crackled through the speakers. Weak, but determined. "Rebecca, if he tries to stop you, fight back. I built Elizabeth House because I couldn't save myself, but maybe it can save someone else. Use it to make space for women like you. Don't let it disappear." The audio cut off. My throat closed. She knew. She suspected, Harper said. That's why she made me promise to never destroy the original file. I looked down at the legal documents my mother's name my own, the trust, the land deed. "If I contest the probate, can I get it reinstated?" "You could," Harper said. "It would take months, possibly years, and your father would fight it tooth and nail. I'm not afraid of that." "I don't think your mother wanted you to spend your life in court," she said gently. "She wanted you to build something." The words hung there thick and sharp. Harper reached behind her and pulled out an old manila envelope. "She also left this for you. Said not to open it until you'd made your decision." Inside was a photograph. My mother stood in a field of long grass, one hand resting on a wooden post. Behind her, the skeletal frame of a future foundation. Her smile was tired, proud, alive, and just visible in the bottom right corner of the photo was the person holding the camera. Madison Reyes. I traced her shadow on the photo with my fingertip. They believed in something I whispered. "Then make it real," Harper said. "It takes a single signature to destroy a reputation." I arrived at Sentinel headquarters just before 9, coffee still in hand, when my phone buzzed with 3 consecutive notifications. Then a fourth Avery. I answered. "Don't come upstairs yet," she said, voice tight. "Check your email, right now." I stopped in the lobby and opened my inbox. Subject urgent, media inquiry. Regarding violation allegations, attached was a PDF screenshots of an article already spreading on multiple military forums. The headline glared, "Ex-Major under review, Rebecca Cole, accused of disobeying orders, compromising mission." My blood ran cold. The article quoted a redacted combat report from Afghanistan claiming I had abandoned her post during a critical extraction, resulting in the loss of military assets and personnel. No mention of Madison. No mention of the child. No mention of why I stayed behind. Avery met me halfway down the stairs, her laptop already open. I traced the report's metadata, the version that leaked its doctored how they cropped out the chain of command override. It was in the original file. You had authority to return to the site. I swallowed. Can you prove it? She turned the screen toward me. The editing software that made this, it left a footprint. Look here. On the screen, code scrolled in tight columns. One string blinked yellow, AC override, legacy 64. It meant nothing to most people, but it meant everything to me. That's my father's authentication stub, I whispered. Avery nodded. It's from the toolkit used by command officers pre-2016. Most people wouldn't recognize it, but I cross-checked. That stub matches archived logins from Colonel Alan Cole during his final year. I felt my knees go weak but didn't sit. It's retaliation, I muttered. I went public, so now they smear me. She looked hesitant. There's more. She clicked open a second tab. Journalists are calling. Someone sent them the redacted report anonymously, with your reinstatement filing attached. They're painting it like a cover-up, I said, lips tight. Yes. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I ignored it. Avery put a hand on my arm. You need to prepare. This is moving faster than I expected. That's when another email hit. Subject mandatory review. 1100 hours, DoD Office 4B. No explanation, no instructions. Just the seal of the Department of Defense. They want a statement, I said, heart-pounding. Or a confession. Or an exit, Avery added. I looked around the office, my office. The glass walls, the glowing interface of Sentinel's core, the nameplates of young engineers who trusted me. I built this. I wasn't going to back down now. By 10:45, I was standing outside Office 4B just off the Pentagon's second ring. The hallway was all steel and silence. I held my documents, proof of edits, command logs, Madison's letter close to my chest. The door opened behind me. I turned slowly. Colonel Alan Cole, my father. He wore his full dress uniform. Not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in the fabric. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me like I was a stranger he had once dismissed and then forgotten. Finally, he said, "You never knew when to quit." I held his gaze. No, but I know when to start. Sometimes justice wears 4 stars on its shoulder. The last time I walked these corridors, I was 25, and in uniform summoned for a closed-door meeting I never got to speak in. This time, no rank adorned my collar, but the weight I carried felt heavier. The halls of the Pentagon gleamed sterile and cold like a memory that refused to fade. An aide led me through a maze of secure checkpoints until we reached an unmarked door. No nameplate. Just 2 guards who nodded and opened it in silence. General Huxley stood by the window, the Potomac glinting behind him in the morning haze. He didn't turn around immediately. "Sit," he said simply. The room was paneled in old oak, its walls lined with metals-framed maps, citations, fragments of campaigns long past. The only thing modern was the steel safe built into the wall behind his desk. He finally turned, eyes sharp under silver brows. "You've had a week?" "I used it well," I replied. He nodded slowly, then pressed a button beneath the desk. The wall safe clicked open. From inside, he retrieved a leather folder, aged, creased its corners, worn like it had traveled too many miles in too many hands. He placed it in front of me with a gentleness I hadn't expected. "You know what this is," he said. I opened it. Inside, an after-action report stamped "Confidential, Command Review Only." At the top, my name. Below, Madison's. And at the bottom, her signature dated 3 days before the mission. The narrative was complete. Engaged hostile forces after deviation from primary extraction point. Civilian confirmed at site. Decision to re-enter was made by Major Cole, citing Geneva Convention Clauses 9 and 18. I supported the choice fully. Without her, the girl would be dead. So would I. My hands trembled. Why wasn't this in the official record? Because your father pulled rank before it reached central filing, Huxley said, sitting across from me. He wanted silence. Some called it protecting legacy. I call it cowardice. I looked up. Why did you keep it? He met my gaze. Because one day someone would need to remember. The door opened. A woman in uniform entered, short, firm clipboard in hand. General Huxley nodded. Major Cole is here for signature verification. She approached, handed me a pen. Her voice was neutral. Please confirm that this document represents the corrected version of your service record. I signed. She countersigned. Then Huxley added his final flourish, 4 bold strokes that sealed the paper in official ink. Effective immediately, he said, Rebecca Cole is reinstated as Major Retired with honor. Her record will be corrected, archived, and made public through appropriate channels. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't just a signature. It was a resurrection. She never got to say goodbye, I murmured. Madison. She did, Huxley replied, with that document. Silence stretched. He stood again, returning the folder to its case, then looked back at me. This is your proof, he said. But proof isn't enough. You want truth? You'll have to drag it into daylight. I stood steadier than I had been in years. He approached the door, opened it, then paused. Now it's your turn, he said softly. Make them remember. They gathered to honor a soldier. They had no idea who else had returned. The banners were crisp. The floor gleamed. Uniforms buttoned to perfection. Rows of polished shoes lined up like silent sentinels. Andrews Air Force Base had hosted countless ceremonies before, but never one where I stood on the edge of belonging, unseen and unwelcome by those who once called me family. Jason's name echoed from the loudspeaker like thunder rolling through a valley. Captain Jason Cole advance. Applause burst from the crowd as my younger brother stepped forward, his jaw square, medals-aligned posture immaculate. He had always been the golden boy, and today, the spotlight made it official. I sat in the 3rd row, non-family but not civilian, a designation of polite exclusion. The first 2 rows were reserved for honored relatives. My chair had no nameplate. Alan Cole sat stone-faced in the front row, his officer's hat resting on his lap, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He hadn't acknowledged me, hadn't even flinched when I walked past him earlier. Meredith, his second wife, wore pearls and a perfectly pinched smile. Their world was intact, gleaming, sterile, until Huxley walked in. He didn't enter like a guest. He entered like a verdict. The crowd stirred. Every head turned. 4 silver stars shimmered on each shoulder of his uniform. Whispers rippled. General Huxley didn't stop near the podium. Instead, he stepped onto it. The master of ceremonies faltered, then backed away. Huxley took the microphone, his voice calm, deliberate. Today, we recognize achievement, courage, and service. Captain Jason Cole represents all 3. Jason nodded modestly. But Huxley continued, service does not belong to one generation alone, nor should recognition. There was a pause, calculated, measured. Before we conclude, he said, gaze scanning the room, there is another name that deserves to stand in the light. My breath caught. A soldier whose record was buried, but never forgotten. A protector who chose conscience over convenience, who honored our values when others chose silence. Now the room was shifting. Phones rose. Cameras clicked. Alan Cole shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Major Rebecca Cole, Huxley said clearly, please stand. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then I rose. The rustle of fabric, the turn of 100 heads, it was deafening. Not the sound, but the weight. My father's jaw clenched. Jason looked from me to Huxley, stunned. Major Cole Huxley said again, now with the force of history behind him, on behalf of the United States Armed Forces, "Welcome back." He raised his hand in a sharp, flawless salute, and I returned it, shoulders squared, gaze steady. The air seemed to crystallize. Cameras snapped. A murmur swelled into clapping. It wasn't thunderous. Not yet. But it was real. I saw Jason's hands drop to his sides. He looked at our father, searching for direction. Alan Cole remained frozen, knuckles, white lips pressed in a grim line. A reporter turned toward me. Another raised her mic. The tide was shifting, and this time I wasn't its casualty. My father had one drawer he never let anyone touch. Until today. The house in Bethesda looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the peeling paint or the faint echo of footsteps in a place that had been silent too long. Or maybe I had outgrown the shadow it used to cast. He was preparing to sell it now, liquidate as they called it in legalese, before inquiries reached the wrong accounts. But before the house changed hands, I had a window. And a warrant. Harper Lynn waited by the car, documents in hand, eyes scanning the empty driveway. "You sure about this?" she asked. "I was born here," I said. "I think I deserve to turn a key." The caretaker, a man in his 60s with nicotine-stained fingers, unlocked the front door, nodded once, and left us inside. The air was stale. Faint traces of old scotch and varnished wood clung to every corner. The study was still intact, just as I remembered: floor-to-ceiling shelves, a framed portrait of Alan Cole in uniform, and that desk oak, imposing with brass handles polished like metals, and one drawer. The one he never let me near. I tried it. Locked. Harper unfolded the court order. "We're covered," she said, voice tight. She found a small set of tools in the hallway closet. He always kept them there for emergencies. Within minutes, the lock gave way with a muted click. Inside, I found memories that had been denied breath. A sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, marked in delicate handwriting, "For Elizabeth only." And beneath it, a faded fax, the original discharge report from 7 years ago. I scanned it. The timestamp didn't match the version on file. The signature was altered, overlaid. Someone had printed on top of an existing form. I could almost see the ghost of my real name beneath the forgery. But it was the envelope that stopped me cold. I opened it slowly, afraid the paper might crumble. Madison's handwriting stared back. "Dear Elizabeth, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. I'm not good at writing these things. I was always better at action, but Rebecca, she's different. She fights with her whole heart, even when it costs her everything. The girl we saved, she lived. Because Rebecca didn't flinch. She turned back when I would have followed orders. And because of that, I get to write this at all. I know there's tension between you and your daughter, but please, don't let the silence win. If you see her again, tell her I trusted her. More than anyone. Ever. And if she ever doubts herself, show her this." I stopped reading. My throat burned. Harper, standing beside me, had grown still. She reached for the fax and held it against the light. "This overlay, this isn't just doctored. It's a deliberate forgery," she said. "If this goes public, your father could face charges for tampering with military records." I nodded slowly, folding the letter back into its envelope. "Then it's time," I said. "Time they see everything." Harper didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, "Are you ready for what that means?" I looked around the room at the desk, the medals, the phantom of a man who'd buried truth beneath brass and silence. "I've been ready since the day he locked that drawer." I turned the letter over. The ink had faded, but on the back, scrawled in slanted script, were the final words Madison had written. "If she ever doubts herself, show her this." Even in death, my mother had a louder voice than all of them combined. The room was quiet, but not serene. There was tension in the air, thick like a storm gathering over polished wood and marble floors. The notary's office in D.C. looked more like a courtroom than a bureaucratic formality. Shelves lined with legal codes, a bronze clock ticking loudly in the corner, and a rectangular table at the center where everything would change. I sat on one side, Alan Cole still in uniform on the other. Jason chose the middle, neither here nor there. Harper Lynn placed a thin leather folder in front of her, the official seal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The notary cleared his throat. We are gathered to verify and authenticate the final testament of Elizabeth Cole submitted by legal counsel Harper Lynn under case file MACR 2723E. My father shifted in his seat, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. His silence was a defense, but not for long. I object, he said finally, voice cold and firm. My wife submitted a different version of her will years before her death. That document has been on file since 2013. Harper leaned forward. And yet that version lacks authentication. The one we present today is both witnessed and notarized, filed in accordance with Maryland state law, and signed in 2015. The notary nodded. We will proceed with evaluation. Colonel Cole, you will have the opportunity to respond. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Harper opened the folder, revealing the original document. The signature was my mother's, the handwriting unmistakable. The final page read, "To bequeath the Elizabeth House property, its full ownership and mission to my daughter, Rebecca Cole. Sole executor, non-transferable." Alan's face tightened. You coerced her, he said. She wasn't well. Harper slid another sheet forward. Medical evaluation from 2015. Doctor's note confirms she was fully competent. I believe you requested that evaluation yourself. Jason, who had stayed quiet until now, looked between us. Dad, he said slowly, is this true? Alan didn't respond. Jason repeated, voice cracking just slightly. Is this true? Alan's eyes darted to me, then to the notary, then finally to Harper. You don't understand. That house? It was political nonsense. She got obsessed. No, I cut in. She got erased. Silence fell. Harper folded her hands calmly. Shall we proceed? The notary glanced over the papers again, then reached for his official seal. With a final heavy motion, he pressed it onto the page. Per the authenticated testament and legal record, he said, Elizabeth House shall be transferred to Rebecca Cole, sole executor. Effective immediately. The room stayed still. Alan stood. He didn't say a word. Not to me, not to Jason. He turned and walked out, his boots echoing across the marble like punctuation marks in an unfinished sentence. Jason didn't move. I looked at him. He looked at the will. But he didn't follow. This was never about inheritance. It was about inheritance of silence. The wind stirred lightly through the empty lot. The house, what little was left of it, stood like a memory made of brick and shadow. Cracked walkways, a rusted gate, and a mailbox that hadn't seen a letter in over a decade. But the land was hers now, and the silence would end here. I stood in the middle of the clearing, hard hat on, clipboard in hand. Avery approached, her boots kicking up dust. They're ready to break ground, she said, motioning to the volunteers behind her, women and men in plain clothes. Some younger than I had been when I first wore a uniform, some older than my mother was when she died. I nodded. Start with the fence. Avery blinked. You sure? Yeah. Tear it down. We watched as the old iron bars gave way under crowbars and gloved hands. With each clang of metal hitting ground, something in my chest uncoiled. This wasn't just reconstruction. It was release. I had shipped in bricks from the outpost where Madison and I last stood together. The same sand-stained walls that watched us make an impossible decision, now they'd build walls meant to shelter instead of defend. Later that afternoon, a car pulled up. A woman stepped out, gray hair, a cane, and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Mrs. Hale," I said softly. She smiled. "Rebecca. I thought I'd bring something that belongs here." Inside her box were letters, photographs, a set of dog tags, and Madison's journal. I held it like a relic. The pages were worn edges softened by years. I opened it and read, "I don't fight for medals. I fight because women like us deserve better." I couldn't stop the tear that traced a silent line down my cheek. That evening we hung the sign. It was carved into reclaimed wood, stained deep with purpose. The lettering read, "Elizabeth House, where courage comes home." Avery stood beside me. "She'd be proud," she whispered. Before I could answer, a voice came from behind. "Are you Major Rebecca Cole?" I turned. A young woman, barely 20, stood there. Auburn hair, familiar jawline. "I am," I said. She hesitated, eyes shimmering. "My mother was Madison. She told me. You saved her soul. Not all wars end with gunfire. Some end with a salute." The wind rippled through the flags lining the path to the front steps. Elizabeth House stood tall behind me, its stone facade catching the light just right, like it had been waiting for this day as long as I had. Rows of chairs faced a small podium. Q Bin, women mostly, sat in their pressed jackets. Some in wheelchairs, others with medals catching glints of sun. Among them were young faces, too, daughters, nieces, strangers who'd read something in the paper and showed up to see history return home. General Huxley stepped to the podium, face solemn but proud. "She wasn't erased," he said. "She was just waiting for the right chapter." He didn't say my name until the last line. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. I stood quietly, heart pounding like a cadence I hadn't heard in years. Then Jason stepped forward. For a moment, we just looked at each other, brother to sister, soldier to soldier. "I think this belongs to you," he said, holding out the insignia from my old unit. My fingers brushed his as I took it. "I wore it once," I whispered. "You should again." We turned to face the flag. The trumpet call began, and as the final note rang out, the entire crowd, civilians, veterans, strangers, rose and saluted, including me. My hand trembled, but only slightly, not from fear, from release. This wasn't the salute of duty. This was the salute of freedom. I stepped off the platform and walked toward the entrance. Near the wall etched with names, a young girl stood in front of Madison's. Her fingers traced the letters. Then she turned. "Maybe one day," she said softly, "I'll serve too. Like you." I bent slightly, looked into eyes that carried the past and the future at once. "Then promise me," I said, voice steady, "never let them write you out." She stood alone no more. From a forgotten name to the face of redemption, Rebecca proved that silence may be imposed, but dignity must be reclaimed. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Comment 1 if you felt her journey deeply, or 2 if something still lingers in your mind.